The Davis household was bathed in the gentle light of an autumn morning. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting long, slanted shadows on the worn wooden table where Emma sat, her fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee. The steam swirled upward, but she didn't drink. Instead, she stared into the dark liquid, as though it held the answers to a question she hadn't yet dared to ask herself. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Lily's going to make it big, Emma. You should be proud of her." Emma hadn't been proud. At least, not in the way Claire had meant. Sure, she was happy for Lily, her younger sister deserved success, but the tone in their mother's voice, the way it seemed to elevate Lily above everything else, struck a nerve Emma couldn't ignore. For as long as she could remember, Lily had always been the one to receive praise, attention, and the handouts. It was always Lily who was the darling. The golden girl. The one who was special. At 26, Emma had learned to live in the shadows. She had made peace with it, mostly. She'd stopped trying to compete for their parents' approval. But there were days like this, sitting at the kitchen table with her cup of coffee, when the weight of it all felt unbearable. And today was one of those days. Lily, sitting across from her, didn't seem to feel the tension. She was absorbed in her phone, scrolling through Instagram, oblivious to the undercurrent of frustration Emma tried so hard to suppress. It wasn't that Lily was intentionally ignorant of their family dynamics, it was more like she had never been allowed to see them. Emma, after all, had been the one to carry the burden of always figuring it out. Can you believe the new campaign for the agency? They want me to head it, Lily said suddenly, her voice light and excited as she glanced up from her phone. It's huge. They think I'm the perfect fit. Emma looked up from her coffee, masking the rush of emotions that bloomed in her chest. Her younger sister had always been effortlessly perfect. Even her success, which Emma would have, celebrated if it had been any other circumstance, felt like another reminder of how much Emma had been left to fend for herself. That's great, Lil, Emma said flatly, offering a smile that felt thin, brittle. I'm sure you'll kill it. Lily beamed, clearly thrilled with the attention her career was getting. Emma couldn't remember the last time she had felt that same level of optimism about her own life. It wasn't that she hadn't been trying. She had spent the last few years clawing her way up in a world that didn't care who she was. No one had ever handed her anything. If Emma wanted a break, she had to earn it. No shortcuts, no privilege, no parental backing. But as Lily talked about her big break, her next big promotion, Emma felt a familiar bitterness curl in her stomach. Her parents, Claire and Thomas, had made it abundantly clear that they were invested in Lily's career. When Lily had announced her plans to join the advertising agency right out of college, their excitement had been overwhelming. They had helped her network, introduced her to influential people, and even pulled strings to get her a foot in the door. But when Emma had pursued her own dreams of becoming a writer, there had been nothing. No guidance, no support. She had been forced to go it alone. Sure, they had said all the right things, do what you love, Emma, follow your heart. But their actions had always shown otherwise. They had never been as eager to help her in any concrete way. Emma remembered the crushing disappointment when she had asked for their help after graduating college. She wanted to attend a prestigious writing workshop in New York, but the tuition was high, and she wasn't sure how to make it work financially. Their response had been lukewarm at best. That's a nice dream, honey, her father had said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. But have you thought about getting a job that pays well? It's not a bad idea to have something stable, especially now that you're on your own. Emma had never forgotten it. She had gone to work at a local newspaper, barely making enough to scrape by, while Lily had been set up with a cushy internship at the top advertising agency in the city. Lily had barely needed to try, it seemed, to glide through her career. And now, here she was, sitting across from Emma with her promotion, her glowing prospects, and the effortless beauty of someone who had been born under a lucky star. Emma's hand tightened around the coffee cup, the hot ceramic heating her fingers, though it was the coldness inside her that made her feel numb. "Hey, are you okay?" Lily's voice cut through Emma's thoughts, and for the first time, Emma realized her sister had noticed the silence. "Yeah," Emma said, blinking rapidly and setting the cup down. "Just tired. Been working a lot." Lily tilted her head, concern flickering in her eyes, though it was quickly replaced by her usual cheerful expression. "You know, you should come with me to the launch party next week. It's going to be so much fun. You need to get out more, Em." The offer felt kind, and Emma hated herself for the jolt of resentment it sparked inside her. How easy it was for Lily to throw out invitations to parties, as if her world were a playground. How easy it was for Lily to be loved, to be taken care of. She had everything, and Emma had nothing. "I'm sure it'll be great, Lil," Emma said, swallowing the lump in her throat. "But I think I'll pass this time." Lily didn't push. She was, in many ways, the perfect sister, kind, generous, and supportive when she wanted to be. But she couldn't help the part of her that had always been a reflection of their parents' adoration. And Emma, for all her attempts to be gracious, couldn't help but feel the crushing weight of being constantly overlooked. That evening, as Emma sat at her laptop, typing up another article for a local magazine, her mind wandered back to the conversation. The same old questions ran through her head. What if I had been born first? What if I'd had the same opportunities Lily had? Would I be someone different? Would I have been more successful? She shook her head, blinking away the thoughts. This was her life now. She was the one who had to scrape by, to push herself to be seen. The world might never see her the way it saw Lily, but she would prove them wrong. She had to, and so she typed on, word after word, building something from nothing, as she always had. The months that followed were a blur of late nights, endless cups of coffee, and the constant hum of frustration that never seemed to leave Emma's life. Her days felt like a carousel of disappointments, punctuated only by fleeting moments of satisfaction that were quickly overshadowed by the realities of the world around her. She was still writing articles for small publications, still struggling to be taken seriously, but the work, though steady, felt hollow. She was constantly hustling, pushing her way into circles where she had no right to be, trying to convince others that her words, her voice, mattered. Despite her struggles, there was a quiet sense of defiance in Emma. She refused to accept the version of herself that had been relegated to the sidelines of her family's life. She would succeed. Not for them, not because she needed their validation, but because she deserved it. She wanted to build her career on her own terms, without the safety net of connections or family handouts. That was the only way it would truly feel like hers, and yet, her success seemed elusive. Meanwhile, Lily's career was soaring. Emma couldn't ignore the steady stream of social media updates, the posts about meetings with industry leaders, the smiling photos from lavish events. She didn't even need to see the family's texts to know what was happening behind the scenes. Her parents were proud of Lily, and their pride was a force of nature, effusive, constant, and always directed at the younger daughter. "I think they're going to make me a partner next year," Lily had said, her voice light and bubbly during their phone call one afternoon. "Can you believe it? It's all happening so fast." Lily didn't seem to notice the quiet discomfort in Emma's voice when she said, "That's amazing, Lil. Really, that's incredible." But even Lily's enthusiasm had a bittersweet edge when Emma reflected on it. Lily's life seemed to unfold effortlessly, as if the universe had decided that everything good in the world would fall at her feet, just because. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Emma was the one who, despite her talent, was constantly fighting for scraps in the quiet of her apartment. Emma often found herself scrolling through Lily's social media profiles, her thumb hovering over the like button as her eyes roamed over the photos of Lily standing next to people who actually mattered, high-powered executives, influencers, celebrities. Emma couldn't help it. She wondered what it must be like to have that kind of ease, that effortless access. What would it be like to be seen? To be enough? But she couldn't let herself stay in that place for long. Every time the pang of jealousy threatened to overtake her, she reminded herself of what she had, a fierce independence, a determination that had kept her going even when everything seemed stacked against her. She was creating something, piece by piece. Maybe it wasn't fast or glamorous, but it was real. And then came the email that it was an innocuous-looking subject line at first, publication opportunity, but when Emma opened the email and saw the editor's name at the bottom, she felt her pulse quicken. It was an offer for her first full-length feature, something that would put her name in front of a national audience. It wasn't a book deal or a viral article, but it was a start, a solid one. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride as she called her parents to tell them, "Hi, Mom, Dad, I have some news," she said, trying to keep her voice casual, as though she didn't care whether they were impressed. "I just got a feature assignment with The Atlantic. I'll be writing a piece on the impact of digital culture on modern journalism." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Emma felt a flicker of uncertainty. She wasn't sure what response she was hoping for, but she didn't expect the silence to stretch on for so long. Finally, her father's voice broke through. "That's great, sweetheart," he said, his tone flat. "But don't forget, Lily just landed a major campaign with that tech company. They're doing a big PR push next month. You should try to make it out to the launch party, support your sister." Emma blinked, her chest tightening. Was that it? Was that all they had to say? "Right," Emma said, forcing the words through the tightness in her throat. "I'm glad Lily's doing well." Her mother chimed in, eager to change the subject. "Oh, I heard from Lily's manager today. They're talking about a feature on her in Forbes next week. She's really climbing the ladder fast, Emma. I think she could go all the way." It was a subtle nudge, a reminder that Lily was still the priority. Her success was the one that mattered. "Yeah," Emma replied, her voice tight, "it sounds like she's doing great." When she hung up, her apartment suddenly felt smaller, as though the walls were closing in. She hadn't expected them to drop everything and throw a parade for her achievement, but the casual dismissal, the forgetting, hurt more than she was willing to admit. She had worked so hard for this moment, and it was clear that they barely noticed. They were too busy supporting Lily's next step. Her world was already mapped out. She didn't need their encouragement, but Emma's world was still a maze of question marks. She didn't have the luxury of certainty. Every choice she made felt like a leap of faith. A month later, as Emma sat hunched over her laptop in a crowded cafe, she finally typed the last line of her article. It had taken everything she had, the late nights, the research, the interviews. But she was proud of what she had written. It was sharp, insightful, and most importantly, it was hers. No one had told her how to do it. No one had paved the way for her. She had carved this path herself. That night, she pressed send, sending her article to the editor, feeling a rush of exhilaration. She wasn't sure if it would be accepted. She wasn't sure if anyone would even read it. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's expectations. The next day, she received a call from the editor. "Emma, I just read your piece. We love it. It's going live tomorrow." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. It wasn't fame. It wasn't fortune. But it was recognition, a moment where her work stood on its own, not tethered to anyone else's success. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The article hit the front page of The Atlantic, generating discussion across social media and even attracting attention from a few well-known bloggers. Emma's name began to pop up in emails from other editors, offering more opportunities. She was gaining traction, slowly but surely. The validation she had longed for was finally here, though it didn't come with fireworks. It was more like a quiet acknowledgement from the universe that she had earned this. And then came the day she saw Lily's Instagram post, a picture of her standing with executives from a major tech company at a product launch event. Emma saw the caption, excited to be a part of this incredible team. Thank you to everyone who's made this possible. #blessed. For a moment, Emma felt a sharp sting of comparison, but it was fleeting. She knew what she had built. It wasn't about being the best or the most famous. It was about knowing, deep in her soul, that she had fought for everything she had, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Lily's been asked to be a speaker at a big conference next month. Isn't that amazing? Emma read the message and smiled. She wasn't bitter anymore. She was beyond that. The road she had traveled was harder, yes, but it was her own. And that made all the difference. The article was just the beginning. Emma knew that. She was no longer going to be the sister in the shadows. The world would see her, whether they liked it or not. Her success would speak louder than anything they had ever said. The world moves fast when you finally catch up to it. For Emma Davis, it felt like she had been running for years, pushing against the current, clawing for any ounce of recognition. She had spent most of her 20s writing in obscurity, feeling like she was shouting into an abyss, only to have her voice echo back at her in the form of rejection letters. But then everything had changed with that first article. The one that was picked up by The Atlantic. It wasn't a fluke. It was the beginning of something far bigger than she had ever anticipated. Once the article went live, everything snowballed. Within weeks, editors from larger publications started reaching out. Emma's name was suddenly everywhere, on blogs, in social media threads, in the inboxes of book agents who had long ignored her. People were reading her work, talking about it, quoting it. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and the world had suddenly decided she was worthy of its attention. But for Emma, the attention wasn't the goal, it was the recognition. The validation that her years of struggling alone had been worth it. Her next big break came when a prominent literary agent, Sarah Jensen, known for representing bestsellers, reached out. She had read Emma's work and believed she had something special. Within a month, Emma had signed with Sarah and started working on her first full-length book. The pressure was enormous. She had no buffer, no safety net, just an opportunity to prove that the success of her article wasn't just a flash in the pan. As she poured everything into her novel, Emma found herself trapped in a delicate dance between ambition and exhaustion. There were days when she felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. Her publisher wanted results, her agent wanted book deals, and her readers, if there were any, wanted more. But Emma was used to carrying weight. She had carried the weight of her own dreams for so long that, in a way, it felt natural to continue. 6 months later, Emma's debut novel Breaking Point was published. It was a hard-hitting exploration of modern relationships, the impact of social media on self-worth, and the struggle to maintain one's identity in a hyper-connected world. The book was raw, real, and unapologetically honest, a reflection of Emma herself. The critics loved it. The book sold out in its first week, but the real game changer came when Breaking Point was picked up by Hollywood. "Emma, you're going to be a star," her agent said over the phone, the excitement evident in her voice. "I just got off the phone with a production company. They want the film rights." The offer was astronomical. Emma felt dizzy as she processed the numbers. The advance alone was enough to pay off her student loans, her apartment rent, and, hell, it could buy her a house in one of the swankiest parts of the city. But it wasn't just the money. It was the recognition. It was the validation that she hadn't just made it in the world of writing, she had arrived. With the success of her book and the upcoming film adaptation, Emma was thrust into the spotlight. She was invited to speak at conferences, to appear on talk shows, to give interviews. She had dreamed of this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the dizzying speed at which her life had transformed. It wasn't just the book sales or the film deal. Emma was also becoming a brand. Her social media following exploded as fans began to connect with her personal journey, her rise from being the overlooked older sister to becoming a household name. Fashion brands started reaching out, wanting her to wear their designs. Influencers and bloggers invited her to their events, and Emma, who had once been the quiet observer of such things, now found herself front and center in the flashing lights of a world she had once viewed from a distance. The phone calls from her parents started to change, too. They were more frequent now, though their tone was still, carefully balanced. "Emma, sweetie, how are you?" Claire's voice was different. Softer. "Nicer, I'm good, Mom. Just busy. You know how it is." Emma could hear her mother's suppressed excitement, as though the very mention of her success had become a touchstone for them. "We're so proud of you, honey," her father, Thomas, added. "I saw the interview with Good Morning America yesterday. You looked great. Breaking Point is doing amazing. You've really made something of yourself." The words felt different. Louder. More sincere. Emma had always known that their praise for her younger sister had been well-intentioned, but it had always felt performative. Their love for Lily was like an ornament they showed off to the world. But now? Now, they were talking about Emma with a quiet reverence, and that was when the invitation came. It wasn't long before her parents called with the request, "Emma, honey, we'd love it if you could move back in with us. Just for a little while, until you find a place that suits you. We've got space, and it would be so nice to have the family together again." Emma was caught off guard. Her first instinct was to say no. She didn't need their pity, didn't need their help. She had a penthouse in the city, a place all her own, where she could look out over the skyline and feel independent. But then she thought about the exhaustion that had been gnawing at her since her rise to fame, the unspoken loneliness of having no one to lean on, no place that felt like home. She hadn't been home in years, and so, after much deliberation, Emma decided to return. She didn't need their help, but she needed the quiet that only home could offer. She needed the comfort of her childhood bedroom, the familiar hum of her mother's cooking in the kitchen, the sound of her father's deep voice reading the newspaper on the porch. She packed her things and moved back into the house where she had spent most of her youth, a house that now felt different somehow, larger, filled with echoes of the person she had become. The first night she was back, Emma stood in the living room, looking around. Her parents had clearly redecorated since she'd moved out. The couch was newer, the walls painted a different shade of blue. The house had an air of polish now, refined, almost manicured. But despite all the changes, there was still something comforting about being surrounded by the familiar. Her mother had insisted on cooking a special dinner for her, setting the table with china they'd saved for special occasions. It felt almost surreal to be back at the table, to be the center of attention in the way Lily had always been. But this time, it wasn't just Lily's achievements being celebrated. Emma had a seat at the table too. "Emma," Claire said, her voice slightly trembling as she poured wine into her glass. I wanted to say how proud we are of you. You've done so much. So much more than we ever expected." Emma's smile was gentle, but she could feel the weight of years of unspoken history in the air. She hadn't needed their help before. She didn't need it now. But part of her realized that this moment, this time, was about more than just her success. It was about reconciling with her past, with the people who had once overlooked her, but now saw her in a new light. Her father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but earnest. We never really understood what you were doing back then, Em. We should have been more supportive. But we see it now. We see how hard you've worked." Emma looked at both of them, the people who had always loved her, but in ways that had never quite matched her own expectations. And in that moment, she realized something. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need them to validate her success. She had done that for herself, but there was something sweet about this moment, something satisfying in the recognition that, at least for once, her parents were proud of her. The daughter they had so often ignored was now the one who had achieved everything they had hoped for Lily, and for the first time in a long time, Emma realized she was exactly where she needed to be.